Falsettos started off being 3 musicals, In Trousers, March of the Falsettos, and Falsetto Land, that were all about the same cast of characters. And then 2 of those musicals got combined into what we now call Falsettos, the longer form 2-act show. So the interesting thing about Falsettos, one of the things that makes it unique, is that it's a sung-through musical, which there are a handful of those, but a lot of musicals will use spoken dialogue in between the musical numbers. Other examples of sung-through musicals include Rent, Les Mis, and Hamilton. These are all almost entirely or entirely sung through. However, even though they all use music throughout, or almost entirely throughout, there is still a difference between the musical numbers, which are structured as songs, and the connective tissue, which is structured still like a scene, just a scene with music. So for example, in Rent, there's a difference between, say, Light My Candle, which is just a dialogue between Roger and Mimi set over the same 2 chords. There's a difference between that and, say, Seasons of Love, which takes the form of a true musical number with the whole cast joining in and singing a chorus and a hook. So that is the kind of difference. In Rent, the connective tissue often is totally a cappella, like the voicemails, for example. Alexi Darling, Mark Cohen, da-da-da-da-da, sell us your soul, just kidding. She sings the same kind of basic melody over and over, so she's still singing, but there's no rhyme, there's no verse-chorus structure, it's just the same melody over and over. So really, it feels a lot closer to speech. Same with Hamilton. There's a difference between, My Shot, which is centered around this hook, this chorus, I am not throwing away my shot. There's a difference between that and then Aaron Burr, Sir, which feels like a scene, even though it's rapped and it's set to music. It's still, the speech patterns follow closely more natural speech. Same with Les Mis. There are these big epic ballads where the characters sing their hearts out, but then there's also connective tissue where the characters sing, She is the first to die, she is the first of us to die upon this barricade. Sometimes they sing it all on one note, which is like recitative in opera. So in every example of sung-through musicals, there's still a difference between the musical numbers that are the highlights and the connective tissue. In Rent, in Les Mis, in Hamilton, they all did different techniques to achieve the same effect, which is that the connective tissue is much closer to natural speech, and then the songs are much closer to what we would consider standard song form, verse, chorus, bridge, chorus. For example, AABA song form, for example, centered around a hook, centered around a melody. In falsettos, there's a lot of musical information happening, even in the connective tissue, which makes it very unique and makes it kind of overwhelming at first listen. And I would argue that instead of trying to make the connective tissue sound like speech, the connective tissue of falsettos is designed to sound like thought. So it follows the character's train of thought completely naturally. And I'm going to show you a bit of tight-knit family. The first number in the show, the opening number, is Four Jews in a Room Bitching. The opening number needs to, tell us who the characters are, set up the world of the show, give us the musical sound of the show. Four Jews in a Room Bitching does all that. But the first scene in a show is what tells us how the story is going to be told. Think about Rent. December 24th, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. That whole scene tells us, okay, there's going to be rock music. He's tuning his guitar. It's going to be largely sung. It's going to be largely narrated by Mark. These are things that this first scene is telling us that aren't in the opening number of Rent, but are in this first scene. So similarly, this tight-knit family song, this is the first piece of connective tissue that we get. And it follows, musically, Marvin's train of thought. And just like a train of thought goes all over the place, and one thought leads to the next in a way that is not necessarily structured, similarly, there's very little structure in this tune. It goes, we start with this little vamp thing. And then he comes in. Well, the situation's this, I do not wish to offend. Already, what is happening? There's no repetition, there's no structure already. So it starts with this vamp, but then as soon as he comes in, we go from this vamp, which is in like a C sharp minor tonality, to this D tonality, which has nothing to do with it, right? Like in this, there's a D sharp and an A sharp. Those turn into D natural and A natural when we get to that D chord, so it's a completely unrelated tonality. And already in the second bar of the singer singing, we've got a completely different tonality. And then immediately afterwards, we go to another tonality with this F sharp. I divorced my wife, I left my child. And then now we're in E. And I ran off with a friend. Now we're in E flat. We go down a semitone. So we're jumping around in tonality. We're also jumping around in time signature. We start off in 4/4. Well, the situation's this, I do not wish to offend. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Then we switch to 9/8. I divorced my wife, I left my 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I divorced my wife, I left my 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And then we land on child in 3/4. I divorced my wife, I left my child, and I, 1, 2, 3. So all together it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 1, 2, 3. I divorced my wife, I left my child, and then we go back to 4/4. Ran off with a friend. Do, 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 do. 1, 2, 3, 4. Ran off with a friend. So we're going through 3 different time signature changes in the span of 3 bars. We're changing tonalities almost every bar. It's complete chaos in the music. There's no real sense of repetition. There's no real sense of structure. And I think that for one thing, like I mentioned, it feels like a train of thought pattern that has that kind of meandering chaos to it. But also, I think it's a little bit bigger than that because you can't impose traditional musical structures on this musical material, but you also can't impose traditional societal family structures on the characters in the show. And I think that's part of why this untraditional approach to composition really, really works for the musical Falsettos.
Don't forget to like and subscribe. MARQUEE is a free weekly Broadway appreciation newsletter with essays, reviews, piano talks, Broadway blasts, quizzes, and more. Sign up for the complimentary or premium edition and learn about all classes and projects at thebroadwaymaven.com. And here's a Piano Talks playlist.